Most business owners are using AI for basic tasks like emails. The ones that are getting ahead, they're using it to transform how they work. I'm Tania Gomez. 6 months ago, I didn't know the difference between ChatGPT and a chatbot. Now I'm learning from AI experts, testing tools in real businesses, and sharing everything that works. Because AI won't replace you, but someone using AI will. This is the AI Apprentice. Join our free community of practice at providercollective.com.au, where hundreds of business owners are learning together. We start as AI apprentices, but we leave as masters. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome to the AI Apprentice. I'm Tania Gomez, your host today, and I'm joined by Sabeh Hassan from Eriko AI. Welcome, Sabeh. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Yeah, to begin with, can you tell us a little bit about your experience in AI and what you're doing at Eriko AI?
Sure. So I have a technology and digital transformation background, working largely in the enterprise space, but recently with Eriko AI, working a lot with SMEs, generally building business solutions, whether it's sort of simple automation or advanced analytical or AI products, generally in relation to anything related to operations of the business, making things more efficient or finding new opportunities for revenue.
Wonderful. AI is certainly a bit of a buzzword at the moment. And when people hear AI, they often think of robots or they jump to conclusions about job losses. Can you break down and just explain to us what AI really means?
Of course. And I like to keep it really straightforward. So AI, think of it as a software that learns patterns from previous examples. And that's it, really. It doesn't think for you. It doesn't sort of replace your human judgment. And in the work that I do with SMEs and providers, AI is mainly taking care of the repetitive information. So for example, like reading, summarizing, comparing, organizing. So there is human cells that still decide the meaning and the action. AI just makes the sort of the heavy parts lighter. And if you think, people often miss that AI can only recognize patterns that already exist, right? So that's how you sort of have to think about it. So you can't create new understanding on its own. It only bases on what already exists. So that's why the human judgment also becomes even more important, not less. So when AI summarizes or compares information, it's not really deciding the thing for you. It's actually you are doing it based on the information you already possess. So hopefully that makes sense in terms of AI.
Yeah, and what's the difference between AI and just an automated system?
Yeah, well, maybe if we think about how it sort of works at a very high level, right? And that might sort of give you a bit of an idea. So automation is like what you use, right? That's the part that's reducing like manual work. And when you think about the AI component, it's usually the model, which is doing the thinking. And the data part is where it learns from. So that's sort of like the steps. So sometimes you just need automation to stop doing a repetitive task. That's very simple. And you can do that standalone without a model. You can have a model, the AI bit that helps you automate. And then the model is built on the data. So there are 3 distinct layers, but it really just starts from the data part.
And when you say data, you mean what you're feeding into it?
Yeah, so there's a lot of consumer-based products or AI solutions that people generally see, and they sort of work really fast and they're able to do a lot of things. But that's being done, or the models that have been trained based on a lot of publicly available data. So it recognizes those patterns. But when you're thinking of like a business, for example, the AI component, it needs some data to learn the patterns from. And that's not going to be readily available online or publicly. So the training of the model for a particular business for a specific thing that's where the data becomes really important, because on its own, it doesn't know your operations, it doesn't know your customers, it doesn't have your information from your CRM. And you probably often hear data is the most crucial part of it. It's the foundation of everything. That's why, because on its own, it can't recognize those patterns. You have to train the model in order for it to actually do any sort of automation.
So when you're using ChatGPT to get it to write an email for you, it's basically using publicly available data from Google and other search engines to determine what is an appropriate response. Where if you were to feed it your last 300 emails, it would then have a different data set to use, different information to use, so that it can then use that as the point of reference when doing the task for you.
Exactly. So if you take a fresh subscription to ChatGPT, it will most likely give you generic responses, or if you ask it to create an email, it would use the information that it's been pre-trained on. So if you think about GPT, basically it's generative, meaning it creates text, and it's pre-trained, meaning it's learned from a lot of information from the past. Usually it's what's publicly available, and the transformer bit is just the architecture that sort of makes it good at understanding context. So as you feed it more and more information, if you have your settings switched on in terms of it learning from the information you're providing, over time you are feeding it your data, and it starts to understand the way that you write, the way that you sort of prefer in terms of the tone of your language and whatnot. So you are in fact feeding it data over time, and it starts to understand you, and over time it starts to become a lot more familiar with your own sort of preferences.
So what is all the hype about when it comes to AI? Why has everyone gone crazy with this new technology?
So, I like to tell SMEs to ignore all that sort of the tools and start with their own operations. Usually things like where you're losing time, what are the things that you're repeating, what's slowing you down. Only because as business owners, over time the hype falls away, and you need to be grounded in what's worth actually doing. And with the hype at the moment, like I was mentioning before, it's a lot of the consumer side, right? Being able to generate images or videos, and you can do it really fast and it looks really cool. It's sort of, I feel like, creating some unrealistic expectations, because the consumer world and the business world are separate, right? They're completely different. You can use those apps to help you with things like marketing, and maybe, off the shelf, you can do a lot of things that are simple, basic. But if you really want to find efficiency or actually generate revenue or actually really help you operationally day to day, you have to start thinking about it a little bit differently. So for example, if the process is messy, undocumented, or handled differently by each person in the team, AI can't magically fix it. And there is this hype at the moment around all the stuff that you're seeing around video and images and text, but you have to sort of maybe step back a little bit and see, well, what's important to me? How can I run my business more efficient, or where can I generate more revenue? And think about it from that lens. So AI doesn't sort of become just a tool, but also like a mirror. It shows you how mature your operations and the data really are once you start sort of changing a little bit of that context.
So what you mean is, instead of going and paying for a cool new AI tool, actually figuring out what's the problem in your business, and then figuring out a use case for AI, and then solving one problem at a time using the most appropriate technology for that.
100%. I'll give you one example. I was providing some advice to one of the providers, NDIS providers, and they were looking at an example from the UK where they've created an application which is in health tech. But once we started looking at, what is it that they really want to do, quickly realized they don't want to start a tech or an AI company, right? They want to create a layer or find efficiencies within the business, but they don't want to sit there creating data pipelines and running, engineering team and whatnot. And slowly we started to discover is that, well, they really need to understand the whole business model properly, and then see where within that business model can AI play a role. And then looking at, okay, well, what are the things do we currently have when it comes to data? Is this data stored correctly? Is it messy? Is it right? And is it actually going to add value? And then see, well, how can we build this? But if you start with look, I need a AI application that does XYZ, you really have to think about it. What is that business model for you? Is it a tech, or do you want to stay within what you're really good at and find where you can, improve operational efficiency and not build a tech platform.
Yeah. What would you think? What would you say is one of the biggest misconceptions you see when talking to business owners about AI?
I had one friend called from one of these SMEs, and they asked me, "What can your AI do?" And it was such a broad question, and I was like, I mean, there's a lot of things it can do, but what is it that you're looking to do? What are your pain points? And what how can forget AI for a second. What is it that you actually want to do? And one of the big misconceptions is that AI is new. It's not really new. The ideas have been around for decades and decades, and we've been actually using AI without realizing it. So, Google Maps, Netflix, Zero, a lot of that AI is just hidden in the background. What's changed is that some of these new applications that have come along, such as, ChatGPT, so you're sort of starting to see it when it's generating things, and it's created this new awareness. So it feels like it's kind of new. It really isn't. And the actual theory behind AI and the foundations of it was set like almost 100 years ago, in terms of if you read the books and where it sort of started from. What's changed is that with cloud computing and these new chips that have come along, it's made it a lot easier to be able to apply those theoretical knowledge into actual software. So the ideas themselves have been around for a very long time.
And those ideas, you're talking about machine learning and actually, being able to use data to learn from that data.
Correct. It's basically, machine learning is also a software which just learns from examples instead of sort of hard rules. And without getting too technical, what I explained before, it really is just learning from patterns. So it looks at this historical information and see how things have been done, and it will reproduce based on those patterns. And sometimes it looks like it is actually thinking, because it generates new things that weren't there. But all it's doing, it's looked at previous examples of maybe similar things, and it's recreating new knowledge. But it has, in effect, learned from the historical. The techniques just change. Which model, how it's sort of looking at the patterns, how it's reproducing. That's the part that changes, but the process is similar.
And I guess because so many people are using it now, we've got many users of AI. I guess now it's just front and center, and I guess also just more accessible. Like, we didn't have ChatGPT that long ago, and so while you talked about examples of Zero or other people who had AI inside their products that might have been, or Netflix that had AI inside of their products that might feed you the next video after you finish one based on tags, as an example. Now, small and medium businesses have the same access to these large language models that people like Netflix do. So now small businesses and medium businesses can start thinking about how to use this technology in a way to solve the problems they have and deliver a better service.
100%. It's made accessible, which is great. Now that people are really thinking about, how they can take advantage of it within their own business. But it's not to sound like a broken record, but start with how is it actually going to help your business, and what is it going to help you? Don't start with the tools. And I see that more often, and it happens not only with SMEs. I've done advisory work for very large organizations, and they also make this fundamental mistake where they see this big shiny tool, they implement it, and it actually makes it worse. Problem worse, it doesn't actually solve it. So unless you're actually thinking about starting a tech company, don't really think about the tools and what is new that you can bring into your industry in terms of being too innovative. There's a lot of tools and solutions already available that you can take advantage of and apply them. Simple things around maybe like, summarizing your notes, or like what you're talking about, writing an email, automated replies, some basic things, right? Start with that as an SME, because firstly, it's very expensive to build things from scratch. Even training models can be, quite expensive. So it really needs to make, the commercial model needs to make sense. Would you actually invest in building something from scratch, from the ground up for your business? Is it actually going to add that much value? Versus possibly think about it in 10, 10, 10. So for example, if it's taking 10 seconds for you to do a particular task, it's probably just a simple automation that's required. If it's taking you 10 minutes in your business and it's quite repetitive, you could then potentially look at maybe doing something with models. But if it's taking 10 days or even 10 hours to do, you can potentially do parts of it that are automated or using AI, but a human definitely needs to be involved because it hasn't advanced that much, where if it's taking days or multiple hours of work, that it's smart enough to be able to do that by itself. So that's usually like a very easy thing that I have in my head, where I just go, okay, well, how easy is this now? This spending each person or someone in the company, clicking some buttons that's taking 10 seconds or to do that particular thing. It just requires a simple automation. It probably just has fixed rules that you could apply, and you can just follow those rules ongoing. If it needs a little bit more work, like I was saying, 10 minutes, then you can have maybe some advanced AI model that can learn. You might have a bunch of invoices, for example, and then you need to do some sort of data manipulation, and you might have some complex rules. Maybe at that point, you could start to look at AI models that can do that, fulfillment of that task for you. Yeah. Does that make sense in terms of like having the sort of cheat sheet in your head?
Yeah. That makes sense. And I think often people confuse AI with automation. If we talk about some user cases for a second, if we talk about something that every business has, so either, most businesses have a sales process where they have some kind of sales conversation, issue some kind of proposal or some kind of invoice and a few chase ups. Or the other thing that comes to mind is like a finance process where you're issuing invoices, chasing invoices, reconciling invoices with something like Xero. Can you give some examples in either of those parts that would be applicable to kind of any business of when would you use an automation and when would it be worth doing something with AI?
Sure. And maybe we'll take that invoicing example, right? Sometimes it's good to sort of step back and start right from the beginning of that process. What I've seen often is that people start in the middle. So there is a process in place. Maybe they're receiving invoices in various forms, right? So it might be scanned, they might be getting, some people might be sharing it in sort of various different ways. And there's a person in between that either needs to take that information, insert it into another system that does another task. And you see people using things like OCR, or they've got scanned documents, and then they go, okay, can I use AI to digitize this, right? And then maybe once it's digitized, I can then just push that information into Xero because it's not in the form that they need it. But instead of adding AI layer where it's digitizing it for you, maybe start from the beginning, look at the data. Can I maybe get that data in the right form from the beginning? That might mean that you might need to invest or maybe bring in a standardized operation where you can automate sending, receiving of invoices in the form that you need, and then maybe use an integration with one of your accounting softwares. So that process is just automation. You don't need AI in that process. So it often is 80%. This is just my own stats. 80% of the times, what I find it's an issue with data ingestion, data processing, and automation. 20% of the time, you actually really need AI. And there's nothing, and it's actually a lot more simpler if you started with looking at just the full, where is the data coming from? How is it being stored? How is it being put in the system? And once you have that part sorted, then you can sort of decide, do you need automation or do you need a model to do some sort of maybe, a task that is a little bit more complex. Like, for example, there might be some text in notes, right? Or you might need to analyze some textual information, which is numeric. At that point, a model makes sense, right? So you might have an invoice, you might have some multiple types of data in there. You might have numeric information, which is doing addition, subtraction, or whatever it is that's feeding into the system. But you may have information that is not numeric, which is text. And that information makes sense for like a GPT or an LLM to analyze and give you some information back. Both things really depend, again, back to the data. And so you may have thought, okay, now I need to first digitize this using AI. But if you took a step back, you said, no, I need to fix my data ingestion part first, integrate it into my software, and then just use automation where it makes sense, then use AI where that makes sense.
Yeah. So if I give an example of my workflow, we have all our data in a CRM. When I change it to a certain status that they've signed the proposal, they automatically get an invoice generated from zero. And they get some chase ups from the CRM that are automation around, chasing up that invoice for payment. And then when they are marked as paid, we have other automations that send out some emails, as an example. So all of that's automation. Then what we use AI for is all that data then gets pushed into a spreadsheet for analyzing. And then we use AI to look at that metrics and tell us, compare month-on-month performance, or analyze this numbers against this numbers and tell us what the updated cost of acquisition might be, or also maybe interpret that and tell us what could be done to improve our metrics. So it's more of a reviewing data, reviewing performance over a period of time, and giving an analysis instead, which I guess is the difference between an automation. As you said, I really liked your phrasing of fixed rules. So if status is A, do B. That's a really fixed rule that can be done in an automation, where the AI can then review this data and give us a report on month-on-month performance using percentages over the past 6 months. You could probably do that with an automation too if I was good enough at using Excel.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if you've already done the hard part, which is getting the data in a digitized form, right? So even the analyzing part, you could effectively just use a BI tool to create your dashboards, and there's some analytics. It's pretty smart now, can give you those answers that you're looking for by simply just using any sort of off-the-shelf BI tool. You can always use AI to maybe analyze that information, but then you have your end-to-end, right from when you're communicating, receiving something, doing any sort of adjustments, and then all the way through to dashboarding.
Yeah. And I think it's the same for our sales process. We've got lots of data in our CRM. We push it to spreadsheets so there's more visibility. And then I often get that data from the spreadsheets and then analyze it using different AI tools. So if it's got client data in it, I might use something like OpenLM so that it's not shared on a server anywhere, and then have a look at, what is analyze this for me, and let's have a conversation together around strategies for improving or optimizing or refining or whatever it might be.
That's great. And I think as a business grows, right, say your business starts to grow, so you have that process around having that data in place, where a lot of the times I spend with maybe slightly larger organization is the simple things. I'll give you an example, understanding who is your customer.
Yeah.
It sounds simple enough.
Yeah.
But oftentimes people don't know who their customer is. And when I say who is your customer, what does that actually translate into a framework and also from a data perspective?
Yeah.
Because the questions that you start to ask would impact that, right? So if you can't ask the right questions, if your data is not structured in the way that sort of makes sense. So if you go, okay, this is my customer and this is the profile of that customer and this is what it looks like, that should be translated in the sort of in data as well, the analytics. Otherwise, doing any type of advanced analytics or AI is no point. Like it's just going to get bad output. So as your business matures and starts to grow, things around like what are your foundational segments, what are your targeting segments, who your customer is, those types of things then start to become more important. And so from your marketing, sales, finance, how you store your marketing data. So you have a whole thread going from you're getting your results from your channels all the way up to your bigger programs of work. and you may have some targets that you want to sort of hit or ROI, and you're able to see targets right from an organization level, department level, team level, right through to execution. And that whole thread needs to be in place in terms of an abstract form, and then the data also then needs to fit into that whole framework. That usually isn't required for like if it's a small company, but as the business matures, you may want to start thinking about those as you go along, because it becomes really difficult if it becomes a large organization and then you have to go back and start to sort of think about those things retrospectively. But those are the types of things in the data side which are important that actually then help you with automation, that helps you with AI. And believe it or not, that's kind of like where I spend bulk of my time working on any sort of large sort of AI projects. That's where I'm starting from. It's just simply definitions, classifications, segmentation, that type of thing.
And when you're talking about that, it's really simple, right? I mean, it's hard to do, but it's if you're starting at the beginning, it's quite simple. You're really talking about what is the information you're collecting from your clients at various points, various touch points. So the first initial contact, what are you collecting? The second contact, what are you collecting? And actually being smart around the questions you ask. So yes, if they're doing a lead capture form from that as an example, it might just be first name, last name, email, business name. And then maybe the next time you're capturing details on pain points. Where are they in the buying cycle, revenue size, anything else they might tell you, where they came from. And then in the next touch point, you might be capturing more information about the size of their business goals, why they engaged you, and being able to then have a way to be able to pull that information across all of your clients to actually have a look at statistically how many of your clients came from this source, how many of your clients have this pain point, how many of these clients came to you for these reasons, so that you can then target your marketing messages accordingly and spend marketing money in the right places. And I guess not just marketing, but then throughout the whole buying cycle and the whole delivery of whatever your product is.
100%. We put it really well. And maybe for an SME, a shortcut to this is just make sure your CRM is used, so, and if it's populated correctly, if you have, all of the data clean, no duplications, you have a standardized way of and classifying things. That is a very easy way to manage your data operationally day to day if your CRM is clean. And one of the advices I normally give is, take marketing as an example. Have a system in place, and it doesn't have to be complex. You can even just use Excel with some rules around standardization of simple things like what do you call your marketing campaigns and what is the taxonomy of that. That really helps historically looking back. And then also, how do you start classifying your customers? What do you call them? It's all definitions, and that information, when you are setting up a campaign, what are you going to call your different ad groups and ad names, right? All of that, if it's in a structured table where you're collecting all of this metadata, basically, that, and whatever you can put that back into the CRM, when you need to do any sort of analytics or even any data automation work or even AI, you can then take that data, export that, put it into a marketing database. And you can then start to do the analytics or the analysis around, okay, what's really working, what's not, because ultimately what you want to try and do, the whole aim is like, see if you can make it into like a coin operated sort of, machine where, you put $1 in, see what you're getting what you're getting back at the end of it. So that only happens if you have that whole pipeline of information structured, sorted, good quality, and there's a process in place around managing your data. Because that is the goal, right? Like the better it is, the more structured, more and the metadata is there, it will really become a way for you to do the things that we've been talking about around finding efficiencies or even generating revenue.
Yeah. So if I was to recap today, your advice for businesses starting with AI would be, first, figure out what the problem is you want to solve. Secondly, it all starts with data. So before you can move forwards, you need to be really clear on what information you need to be collecting to make business decisions across the rest of your business journey. And the third takeaway would be to not focus so much on the tools, but to focus on the data you're capturing and how you're going to use that data to make better business decisions.
Absolutely. That's it. Yeah.
Is there anything that I've missed?
No, I think you've captured it adequately, right? I don't think making it adding more is just, there's no need to make it that complex. It's that simple. Don't focus on the tools, focus on what's important to your business, figure out the data that sits behind it, make sure it's in a good health, and remove also one last thing I would say, start with one task that you repeat every day, right? Just make it simple. So things that you've just mentioned, start with that one task, whether it's drafting your email, job ads, report summaries, all the marketing stuff that you spoke about, and just do that one small thing. If it works well, then just repeat that process for other things. And then that's how you can just build maturity.
Yeah, I love that too.
Yeah.
If someone wants to reach out with you with any questions or to see how you might be able to help them, what's the best way to get in contact?
Sure, Sabeh at Eriko, ERIKO.ai.
Perfect. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
In 30 minutes, you just learned what most business owners will spend months trying to figure out on their own. Want to keep that momentum going? Join our free AI Apprentice community at providercollective.com.au. Hundreds of business owners testing tools and sharing real wins. Come and be an AI apprentice with me. Let's become masters together. I'll see you next week, or better yet, I'll see you inside the community today.